And so that's something that I realized a lot of readers probably feel intimidated by this overwhelming amount of information that's just coming at them at all times. And I wanted to help cut through that in some fashion. So that's really what we think about a lot at Vox, is helping readers come into stories when they're not completely caught up and helping them understand what's happening.
Welcome to the Innovators series, featuring leaders in the information industry whose outlooks have propelled them to the leading edge of data, mobile, and community engagement. The Innovators series is brought to you by the College of Journalism and Communications at the University of Florida and the Knight Foundation. With tonight's guest, here's Matt Sheehan.
Hello, and welcome to the Innovators series. Our guest today is Melissa Bell, Senior Product Manager and Executive Editor of Vox.com. Melissa is the second media and communication leader in a series of 6 who will join us here at the College of Journalism and Communications in the next 20 months to talk about where the information industries are and where they're going. Vox.com launched in April and was co-founded by Melissa and colleagues from the DC media sphere, including Ezra Klein and Matt Iglesias. From its conception, Vox pledged to help readers, quote, understand the news through a thoughtful recasting of how information is packaged and presented. Aligning themselves with the Vox Media Group, which publishes the sports site SB Nation and tech site The Verge, Melissa and company launched version 1.0 of Vox.com in just 2 months. Prior to founding Vox, Melissa was a blogger, feature writer, and product manager at the Washington Post, helped found Mint, a business publication in India and a subsidiary of the Wall Street Journal, and wrote for a number of publications, including Time, The Guardian, and Town & Country. She hails from San Diego, California, and professes to make a mean banana and cheese quesadilla. Let's give a warm University of Florida welcome to Melissa Bell. Melissa, we're so glad that you were able to join us, and coming down to Gainesville. We talked about how it was a little bit longer trip than you anticipated, but thanks so much for coming in.
It's great to be here. It's been a really wonderful day, and I wanted to thank everyone for the conversations that we've had today. It's just been a fantastic experience for me to get to speak to you all, so thank you. Good.
So let's dive right in, and let's probably hit the hardest hitting question that we're going to have this evening. What's your recipe for a banana and cheese quesadilla?
It's a secret Bell family legacy. You take a flour tortilla, Havarti cheese, and a banana, and you put them all in a frying pan and you cook them up, and you add ketchup. There's some hot debate in the Bell family if you also add Worcestershire sauce. I don't agree with that. But it's the best comfort food you can possibly have. It's delicious.
We'll have to figure out a way to squeeze that in. But
it's good.
In all seriousness, we didn't invite you down for your culinary prowess. Let's talk a little bit about Vox and how you came about to moving from where you've been, starting doing a startup in India and then moving to the Post, and now you've launched this new site which you put together with a great team in a relatively short order. Why do that?
Well, I think it really started, India helped because I was able to be part of a startup in India very early on in my career. And it was so exciting, even though we had something of a format because we were joining with an Indian newspaper called the Hindustan Times and the Wall Street Journal. So we had an idea in our head of what we wanted to create, but it was still the power of creating something out of nothing that was really exciting and wonderful to be a part of. But when I returned to the Washington Post, that's really where I started to catch the digital bug. I had an editor who I had worked with at the newspaper in India, Raju Narasetti, who told me that I needed to take a job on the digital side of the Washington Post. And I sort of pushed back. My dream was to be a magazine writer, and I was deep into a story that I was writing for the Washington Post magazine, and I thought that was going to be my career, was these long, florid prose pieces. And he said, you're missing the most exciting opportunity. He said, this is where we're creating the future right now. You really need to explore this. You need to be a part of this. And he was right. It's just, I've been on this amazing adventure of asking questions about our own industry in one of the most fascinating times. And I think that what I've been doing for the last 4 years is really thinking about how do we apply storytelling in this new format that we've had for about 20 years. We've been using it for about 25 years, but it's still so new, and it's still so young. We don't have any questions really answered about it, and so that's really what led me to Vox, was just thinking about a lot of the questions about how do we tell stories and how do we deliver news to people today.
And some of those questions have led you to a very specific way of presenting the news and recasting the news. In a piece with The Guardian that that they interviewed you for, you said that we, the media industry, present the news in a way that puts forward the newest information, not the most important information. Mm-hmm. How has that perspective formed what Vox does?
It's really integral to what we think about our site. I think that there's a huge value in presenting the latest information, and there's a lot of organizations that do a fantastic job of presenting the latest. But I think that there was a real opportunity that I saw, and my fellow co-founder saw as well, in the fact that there was a lack of context sometimes to stories. We often would treat stories think about them in the format that they needed to belong in for the different technologies that they were in. So for a newspaper article, it was a certain number of inches because that was the technology of the print paper. It had to be a certain length. A newscast has to be 30 minutes or an hour, and so you structure your stories according to that. But online, there is no length requirement. My co-founder Matt Iglesias likes to make the joke that there's no telegraph fees online, so we can afford a couple extra characters. But that's really, I think, a smart point, because there was a reason why we started structuring our sentence structure was when we started sending news back from foreign correspondents across the oceans on telegraphs. And so online we have the ability of space and time, and what that means is that we can access the background of stories, we can access the context, and we really believe that we can offer a service to readers by giving them information about news stories that they may not be familiar with.
The ability of the internet has also kind of transformed how information is delivered as well. Mm-hmm. So social networks like Facebook and Twitter present information in what's called the stream. Mm-hmm. And that led to a way of consuming information that kind of became a vulnerability for you when you stepped out of that stream for a little bit. Can you explain
Sure.
that?
And it also goes into the idea of the latest that was something of a problem. If you see Twitter streams, they're reverse chronology. If you see Facebook, there is a Facebook algorithm that presents you different pieces of content, but usually it's the latest piece of content. And I think even if you look at blogs, the format of blogs were always the latest post would be at the top. And I was working as a blogger, and I was just sort of hooked into the internet, and it was so much fun and also overwhelming, but I felt like I always think about these like matrix mind melds that you get to have, and you're able to just sort of scan through the whole internet, and you have access to all this information. And when you're doing it 14 hours a day, and you're just fully in the flow of information, you feel as if you're getting all of the information you need, because it's all right there for you at the taking. I stepped away into more of a strategic role, and as soon as I did that, I felt completely disconnected with the news cycle. I had so much trouble understanding what was happening. I couldn't follow stories anymore. I felt like I stepped away for a few days, and suddenly I didn't know what was going on, and it made me feel insecure as a reader, that I was suddenly faced with I felt like I had a very smart understanding about what was happening in the world, but it was that I was just following it intently. And as soon as I moved away from it, there would be stories that I would be interested in, and I would really understand them, and other stories that I was coming into new. It took me a long time to kind of figure out what was happening, and so that's something that I realized a lot of readers probably feel intimidated by this overwhelming amount of information that's just coming at them at all times, and I wanted to help cut through that in some fashion. So that's really what we think about a lot at Vox, is helping readers come into stories when they're not completely caught up, and helping them understand what's happening.
One of the techniques that we use here at the College of Journalism in journalism and public relations and advertising is to think about a public in how we craft our messages. And you have kind of a public in mind that you designed Vox around, right?
Yeah. This is so funny because if she sees this, she'll make fun of me for this. My older sister is who I think about all the time as my ideal Vox reader. She's wonderful, incredibly smart, and is an art teacher. So she's always in front of students. She's always teaching. She's always talking to people. And when I talked to her about news stories, it was always kind of this funny conflict because she would tell me what she thought of a news story. And it was pieced together from sort of different sources, and she hadn't had a lot of time to sort of understand what was happening. And so we would always fight. Like, she would have a different opinion about what was happening in the news than I did. And I was frustrated because I was like, this is my job. I know this story well. And she would be like, no, she's an older sister, so that's how everything I say is no. But in talking to her, it really is that she's sort of at a loss. So she's trying to figure out how to get the information for herself in the time that she has. And I talked to her about her frustrations with this, and I always think about, I want to make sure that I can deliver a package of news to a reader who wants to know about a subject, but may not have the time and space to really dive deep into a subject. And I also want to offer them the ability to, if they are interested in that subject, if they have an understanding foundation, that they can then take a step further and understand it further and dive deeper into the topic, but at least provide them that stepping stone to get there.
And you guys have created a new construct of presenting news that are called cards. Mm-hmm. How do those play in? How did that come together? Is that something that you've been playing around with before?
A little bit, but really it came out of our conversations with Vox. We thought about it as we wanted to build a news service that also had at the base a resource. In our early conversations, we talked a lot about how Wikipedia is a resource for users, and we wanted to create an ability to package our reporters' work. I'm sure a lot of you in this room are reporters, and when you follow a story, you do a lot of work around that story. You write a lot of articles. I'm sure that some of you are tweeting about it. There's all of this content that's created that you have in your mind that you're constantly pushing out into different formats. But there was no centralized repository. We have a fantastic healthcare reporter who's just one of the preeminent experts. She's been quoted twice in Supreme Court decisions around healthcare, Sarah Cliff. And when you saw her reporting, it was spread out. Her information was spread out over 2,000 blog posts and articles. And so we wanted to create one space that was constantly updated and kept fresh, that readers could find and understand what is Obamacare and what is the background of Obamacare and what does this mean. So Sarah has a card stack that she's created, and when news developments happen, and she changes those card stacks to reflect those changes. She still is writing news stories all the time, but she's able to do a lot less work because she has this card stack, so she can send readers to the card stack to get that background information. And we sort of think of it as a layered approach to the news. So you're delivering new, and then you also have this resource that is accessible at all times.
It's interesting that you mentioned Wikipedia. Is Wikipedia a competitor to you, do you feel?
I don't know. It's I should have more of a competitive spirit, but I feel like it's strange to think about competition online right now. I mean, I want people to pay attention to my stories, and I think that we're producing great content, and and I want to be delivering information to readers. But I also feel like there's just a lot of space. I think that Wikipedia is more of a inspiration than it is a competitor. I guess it's competing for eyeballs in some fashion. But I just think that there's so much interest online. There's so much audience out there looking for information and content. It's not just the American audience; it's the international audience. There's a lot of space out there. So I don't think of Wikipedia so much as a competitor, so much as a place that I learned from. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So the cards have been in effect for all 6 months of it. Was that a launch feature? Mm-hmm. How have you seen? Have they been successful in getting people in?
They've been great. I mean, I think we're really proud of them. I mean, it was definitely something that we launched really fast, and it was the one feature that we added as a new feature in the beginning. And if you look at our card stack prototype we built, we did it in sort of an afternoon. We came up with this idea and worked it out on a whiteboard. and built it out. It looks really similar to the card stack you see today. We haven't made many changes to it from a technical perspective. And we've done some changes with the editorial parts of it, but we haven't taken a real hard look at it. And I'm really excited because we've seen readers respond to it. People are using them. They're engaging with the card stacks. They're coming back to them. And I'm excited to sort of take another stab at thinking about the product of it in the next few months, because I think that we've learned a lot of lessons about how people are using them, and we want to keep putting resources behind them because I do think it's a great delivery mechanism.
Are you finding folks are finding the cards or that need that information, or are they people that already have some sort of invested interest in the topic?
I think it's a little bit of both, but what we can see from usage patterns is that there's actually a lot of traffic that comes from Google to the cards. And I think that is really a sign of something that we want to help. So people go to Google a lot of times because they have a question about something. They hear something in the news and they go to Google to seek an answer out. And so, for instance, we have a card stack on ISIS. And so people are going to Google, they hear ISIS in the news, or they hear ISIL, it's the confusion over ISIS or ISIL, and they type it into Google, and our card stack comes up. And I think that that's a sign that, and then the reader goes into it, and then they read a number of cards on it. And that to me is a sign that we're helping deliver information to people who need it, when they need it. That I'm excited about that response because it seems to me like they're really, we're trying to answer questions around these topics, and they're finding it that way.
Of course, with any startup, and especially one as high profile as Vox, there are the detractors for that. And one, Pando Daily, Nathaniel Mott, offers a kind of a pessimistic view that I wanted to get your perspective on. This is his quote: "If the best in explanatory journalism looks like BuzzFeed, written by a college professor, perhaps the category won't be as huge as Bell, Klein, and Iglesias and Vox Media CEO Jim Benkoff agree." Did you have a conversation with them afterward, or is that kind of one of those?
No, I actually have never heard that quote before, so I'm going to have a conversation with them now.
Well, it came from the CJR piece, so it's a little while ago. But I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, how are you differentiating yourself from the BuzzFeed by college professors, which we probably love, right?
I actually I'm sort of complimented by that. I think college professors are cool, and I think BuzzFeed is really interesting. So, I find that as a compliment. I mean, I think that I think that the process of all of this is, somebody the other day asked if, how we felt about Vox, if we felt Vox is a success. And I think Vox is a success, and I'm very proud of the work that we're doing, but I also don't think that we can say it's a success right now. I want us to be judged, with our work over time. And we're so young. There's so much that we still can do with our work. And that's what really excites me, is that we're 7 months old. We just turned 7 months. And we're just starting to sort of figure out what this is. And if people, I think that, if people in the industry think that this is all we have, that's great. Because I hope that we will show them that there's so much more that we can grow into. And I think that what we have right now is a really, great product, but I see it much more as I want to be building something over time, and I want us to be building a type of journalism that will last for a long time, that really can help people in a different way. I think that there's a ton of types of journalism that help bring information to people, but that excites me is because we're just in the growth period. So I think I'm okay if there's some detractors, because there's going to be. We launched with the idea that we would make mistakes so we could learn from those mistakes. And that was really important to us. We wanted to learn from our failures. And we had the option. We thought about launching, we first considered launching in September of this year, and then we pushed it back to December. And then we decided to launch in April, and it was because we were having a lot of discussions about, do we sit in a room with each other for 8 months and hypothesize about what this site will look like and be, or do we put it in front of users and learn from them? And so that, I think, is really the strength in what we'll do. So, ask me in 5 years.
We will.
Okay.
We hope you come back in 5 years. You come back sooner. And I think the fact that you didn't spend 8 months studying it tells you that you're not BuzzFeed by professors. But we tend to spend a lot of time looking at things here. So Vox Media Group itself is kind of known for its platform, for the back end, the technology that powers the sites like SB Nation and The Verge. It's a system called Chorus, correct? How much of that is contributing to your success and gives you the flexibility and freedom that other products may not allow?
It's been a huge help. It is the reason why we were able to launch so quickly is because we use the SB Nation backbone. For people who are familiar with technology development, it can take a very long time when you're designing a site over many different breakpoints, over many different devices. Figuring out proportions and figuring out all of these like really small little details can be very difficult and very time consuming. We were lucky because we had a skeleton that worked and has been a very big success. SB Nation is a huge website and with a huge audience, and so it was working just fine for them. So we didn't have to make a lot of choices around what does our homepage look like, what does an article page look like. We had a great example to build off of. That's why we were able to invest time in something like the card stack, because all the big questions that we had, we could focus on that, focus on our branding, focus on our logo, focus on some of the new things that we had, and we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So that's a huge benefit to the platform. But what I think is much more impressive about Vox Media, and one of the reasons why I was so excited to partner with them, is that Chorus is a great product, but the product team and the technology team that they have there, it's much more about the culture of the team, and they're a team who believes so much in change and constant experimentation. I've been there for 9 months, and I think that we've reorganized and refocused, and thought about different strategies and different imperatives about 3 times. And it's this great nimbleness that they have, where they test something and really learn from that and say, okay, that's good, but we're gonna shift it slightly and we're gonna go this way. And then we're gonna shift this slightly and go this way. And so it's this constant ability to move quickly, even as the company is growing. And that's really what I think is the power of the company.
So you made a strategic decision in building this. You shopped it around with the Washington Post company, and you ultimately made the decision with Ezra and took a couple other folks from the Post as well to move to a different company. Why leave the Post? Why not build something on a more established brand?
Well, I think that we were really interested in starting something on our own that was separate from the print mission. The Washington Post really needed to focus on building the Washington Post, and part of the Washington Post is this vibrant, very much money-making part of their company, which is the print paper. And so no matter what, the Post has to put resources and energy and process behind that component of their organization. And one of the things that we wanted to do was really think of it solely as, first and foremost as a digital property. And what would that mean? What would that look like for our business strategy, for our technology strategy, and for our editorial strategy? And so I think it was a decision on their part to say we want to focus on the Washington Post, and I think it was a decision on our part that was not the that we had done a ton of great work with them, but it was time to sort of focus on something just specific to this one question that we had, and not the many questions that are important and valuable at the Post, but not the ones that we wanted to try to answer right then.
At the Online News Association conference this past September, I think it was September, it may have been early October, you said you can have a culture of creativity and startup in any newsroom right now. Do you still stand by that? Yeah.
I don't know, because I'm not in any of the news organizations. I hope that's true, and I think that it really matters to. It's something that I think is important for the individual to create. I think that we're in a time of such change in our industry and such tumult in some ways that I think it's really our responsibility, each one of us, to be bold in our own work and to think about experimenting in our own space. So if you're, even if you don't feel like you're empowered in a position of management or strategic decisions, at least in your area, that the patch of grass that you own, be the leader in that area, whatever leader you can be. I saw this often at the Post, where there was, there was reporters who would just, sort of say, I'm curious about this. I want to try this out. And they would try something a little bit different on the side, and some of them would be successful at it, and some of them wouldn't. But when there was success, it was rewarded, and they were able to try something more. And the more that you experiment, the more you're, if it works, then and it's not going to work every time. But the more that you try, I think the more that you can help change anything. And I think that's really important. And
you were a change agent at the Post from all accords, and when you moved from the style section into your role as the blogging platform director. I recall, and especially now since we lost him a few weeks ago, the Washington Post iPad ad. For their new iPad product. You had Bob Woodward trying to figure out what the heck this thing does. Yeah. And then you had Ben Bradley in there. And one of the closing lines, which was absolutely phenomenal, and we'll tweet this out so people can find it. These kids think tweets don't twit themselves, or tweets twit themselves. Yeah. There's this culture of youth in startups and change. And Mark Zuckerberg, in fact, has even said that, quote, young people are just smarter. He said that in Stanford in 2007. Did you find that at the Post?
No, I didn't. Ben Bradley, I had such a crush on him.
You were at his house for one of the events. You did a Mad Men blogging. Yeah.
I was fortunate to get to know him and his wife Sally, and his son Quinn over the years. And Ben was just a force. I mean, I've never seen anyone like him and his, I guess except for Sally, who's also a force in her own self. Sally's a great example of this. Sally was somebody who was a established columnist, and she decided that she wanted to become a religion blogger for the Post. And I think she did that. I'm not sure how old she was, but she was in her 60s when she decided she wanted to take this up. And that spirit of change, I think, can be in any person. When I was talking about reporters, doing their own thing in their own space, I was thinking of Ron Charles, who's a great book critic at the Post. And one of the big changes that we made at the Post was we ended the Book World, which was a part of the paper that was beloved by print readers. And so the book critic job was a little under siege, and they were, you don't know if you're going to have that job available to people anymore. And Ron just sort of decided that he was going to start a YouTube series, and it was called the Hip Young Book Critic, I think, or something like that. And Ron is, I'm not sure how old Ron is, but he's been at the Post for a number of years, and he started this amazing YouTube series that just became incredibly popular. I love that. I love that the spirit of innovation doesn't have an age to it. If you're curious, no matter what age you're at.
But Vox.com doesn't have much diversity in age, right?
No,
I think we were talking last night that the graybeard, and I won't say who, the graybeard of the Operations 35.
I'm the graybeard. It's very sad. I am. I'm the oldest on the Vox.com staff right now, it's something that I don't think that we necessarily set out to hire into youth, but it does matter. I mean, there's monetary restrictions. I've spoken to a couple people who would love to join us, but we're a startup, and we're not able to pay what people can make at traditional, comfortable, more established news organizations. And I think that plays into it. But I hope that as we grow, it's going to be something that we can hire and have space for people who of all ages. So
the other challenge for startups, and I think one thing that we've noticed is the glasses size matter in startups, and including your own. I think the first time that at O&A when we first met, I walked right by you because you weren't in your glasses. In the spirit of that, let's see if we can little outglasses each other here. We'll go a little bit bigger. These are not prescription, by the way.
Fantastic.
Thank you. So, in addition to age problems, we sometimes have. I feel ridiculous. I'm sorry. I can't do this. There's also the bro culture. And you've kind of experienced that a little bit too, the fact that startups are often young white males. And in the popular press, when people talk about Vox.com and the Vox.com starting it out, it's always Ezra Klein's Vox.com. Yeah. How do we combat that? Or I mean, you've also been very outspoken in the fact that it's not that case.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just a dialogue that we have to constantly have. I think that it was a learning curve for myself. I'm somebody that prior to Vox, I would always joke that I preferred the shadows. You know, I was happy prior to Vox or prior to at the Post. I did a lot of work that was in the background, and I didn't feel the need to talk about my role or promote my work in articles and conferences and stuff like that, because I felt as if it was fine to have other people sort of be on the stage, and I love to do collaborative work. I love being a part of a team, and I never felt as if I needed to talk about my position. When I came to Vox, I also have been lucky enough to work with people where I really don't think gender is a question in their mind. I don't think my partners think about gender. I don't think about them as men. We just work together. But when I came to Vox and there was a media pickup around this story, where it was referred to as Ezra's Vox, and it was kind of this constant conversation about there's no women leaders in startups. I realized that by not speaking about it and by not having a conversation and by not addressing the fact that there is a real need for women leadership, not just in journalism but across many industries, I realized that I was doing a disservice to myself and to other women that are younger than me. It's a conversation that I think that we had in this country for years, and we were able to make a ton of strides in terms of gender equality, in terms of thinking about diversity. And then I believe that the conversation sort of stopped happening. We felt as if we had achieved a lot of the needs that a lot of the equaling out of institutionalized sexism. Possibly not racism, but I do think that we thought of ourselves in some sense as a post-racial society. But the question of inequality is still a huge problem. And I think that the more that we don't talk about it and the more that we don't discuss it and the more that we're not proactive about thinking about hiring in terms of a macro look of diversity and creating a culture that's welcoming and opening, the longer it'll continue to be a problem. So it's definitely been it's been a great experience for me to sort of think about this and talk about it openly with people and understand it better.
And you've had a very storied career so far in kind of doing the startup and pushing boundaries and tinkering and rethinking. Did you ever feel that you weren't invited to the club?
I think that there's times. It's funny because I think that there's times that you can. This is the problem with sexism or racism or putting somebody in another category, because it's so often that it's very subtle, that the criticism or the experience that you have can oftentimes be sort of explained away in your own head. I joke about one experience where my colleagues were taken out this is a long time ago, at a news organization that I worked at, and the male colleagues got to go out for scotch and I got to go out for crepes. And I didn't really think about it. It was kind of like, I was like, like maybe the people didn't want to drink scotch that day. Maybe they just were in the mood for crepes. But then but then at the same time, it's a little curious, and there's also an understandability. It's difficult for an older male to take a younger female out for a drink. There's questions around that, but that's oftentimes that's the place where there's conversations and casualness that can help to the growth of a close mentor-mentee relationship. And so oftentimes the experiences that I had were subtle and not big and in my face. But looking back on it, I can see points in my career where it was small, but it matters. And those small moments are the moments that we have to be really aware of, so we can make sure that we're not continuing to do them.
And what advice would you give our students who are following in your footsteps? So they're not that far behind you, but what advice would you give them?
In terms of anything?
Just dealing with,
or in terms of, in terms of
wanting to blaze a path similar to what you did.
You know, I think I've mentioned this a couple times today, but I mean the biggest thing for me is that we have just some of the best careers ahead of us, and we chose an industry where you get to pursue your curiosity, and you get to think about the stories that we all share. I mean, there's nothing more really intrinsic to the human experience than telling each other stories to try to explain our experience. And those two gifts, I just feel I'm so grateful for, and I'm so excited that I get to do this as a career. And I think that the more that you let yourself ask the strange questions and think about, give yourself the freedom to be curious, and give yourself the freedom to be a little ridiculous in your thought process. The more exciting you'll have, the more exciting career you'll have. You know, this is really a place that you can go down some strange rabbit holes, and you should want to go down those rabbit holes. It's a really fun time, I think, for you.
I think you used the metaphor earlier. Find a corner and just play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really do believe that. I mean, I think that this is a place of. We're really at a time right now where you have the chance to do this in your own field. You know, one of the first things that I did I started a blog for myself, and I really thought it was just my place to kind of talk about, you know, the chaos in my life, and it was, you know, just a private little place, and I thought of it as a place to play, and that actually led me into the digital strategy. That's where my former mentor started. You know, he was reading my blog, and he was like, "You should be doing this for real." But it was just because I gave myself the freedom to kind of have fun and try different things. And I think it's hard to kind of take those. It's scary to kind of take risks and stuff like that. But we're able to do it in small spaces, and you don't know where that's going to lead you.
So we're lucky that we have you as kind of a guidepost for that. And there are a lot of folks out there who, including one who calls himself a digital prophet for AOL. So I don't know, folks may have seen the New Yorker piece earlier this week about David Shing, who calls himself Shingy, who gives that. Do you have a Shingy?
Do we have a Shingy? Everyone is a Shingy at Vox Media. I mean, I think that there's actually a bunch of people that I would assign Shingy status to at Vox Media. And I think that the thing about Shingy is, you know, I feel like, you know, we're sort of teasing him online right now, but I think that he's excited about what we're doing, and he's full of passion, and he looks a little different than other people might you know, think people should look, but like, who cares? He's excited about what he's doing, and he's curious about this, and I think that's great. I think that you know, there's a time right now for optimism and excitement about the way that we're shaping our communication patterns, and the more you're interested in it, you know, the better you are. So yeah, there's a lot of Shingys at Vox Media.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah, I think so. There should be more. What was his joke? It's a bear in zebra striped pants or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
There should be more bears in zebra striped pants everywhere.
A lot of chair circles instead of desks in your office.
Exactly.
So one of the big reasons that we bring folks like you in for the Innovators is to have these sort of conversations with our students and our faculty as we look at our curriculum. What advice do you give, or would you give for us as we're looking to prepare the next generation of your employees and journalists?
We had some really great conversations around that today, and I've been really impressed with what you are doing here. I think that the act of doing is so important in learning journalism today. And one of the things that we discussed about, I'm not sure in which conversation, but was this idea that you can, that you're teaching people how to brainstorm and how to work in collaborative teams and how to think about being quick to try new techniques, and that's great. Underneath sort of this, like, with all of this, like, sort of layered over this idea that, like, the traditional rules and techniques matter, and I think that sounds to me like a fantastic experience for the students. It sounds like you're getting to really think about some deep theories of journalism, but actually learning it by doing it. And that's really, I think, the best way that you can teach people. I still think that we should all be learning, even when we're at work. It's constantly changing. We're constantly creating new forms of delivery. We're constantly changing our story formats. And so we have to be content with learning always. And so that's really what I think you need. Sometimes you need to learn how to learn well. And so I think that that's an important skill that you can learn here.
Well, Melissa, I'm sure we could spend hours continuing this conversation, and perhaps we will later this evening. We will take you out for whiskey and not crepes. But I did want to give the audience an opportunity to ask a few questions for you. So if you have a question, please come up to the microphones, and Melissa will answer. Our lovely Professor Foley.
You've talked about a lot of things. You haven't talked about money. How do you survive? How do you eat? And by the way, you look a lot like James Lipton.
What is your favorite word, Mike?
You don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
You really don't want to hear that.
How do I eat? I make a lot of banana and cheese quesadillas. Like, shockingly many. It's kind of disturbing. The business, Vox Media. Well, it helps to not have to have a very expensive distribution system, nor a very expensive creation process. It's pretty cheap to put stuff up online. The way that we work on Vox Media is we have a number of different revenue sources. Our main source is branded advertising, and we have an in-house creative agency called Vox Creative, and they work with advertising agencies to create really in-depth multimedia, beautiful advertising experiences. We also have, with some of our companies, we haven't started this with Vox.com yet, a conference business for Eater and Curbed and Racked, which are 3 of our lifestyle brands. And there's a bunch of different smaller attempts at sort of thinking about monetization. And I think that's another area that's really rife for innovation and creativity. Online for many years, we've been sort of this, I wouldn't say slaves, but maybe sort of we've been sort of locked in combat with banner ads, and that really has been the single way of making money online. David Plotz, who's the former editor-in-chief of Slate, he mentioned, though, that when he started Slate, there was 4 ways to make money online. And the primary one was banner ads, and now I think there's 76 different revenue sources from different journalism outlets. So I think that there's just a ton of innovation happening in that field as well.
Thank you. I think what you're doing is terrific.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely terrific.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I'm Jennifer.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming to visit us. We really appreciate anybody from the real world who gives advice. I know that Matt kind of touched on this, but as a woman, what advice would you give to other women on how to deal with this kind of male-dominated field? So first of all, it's actually not male-dominated. There's a lot of really fantastic women out there working. If you look at the leadership positions, there's a lot of male leaders, and that is something that is definitely something that we need to change, but not in a aggressive way. Don't worry, Matt. But just in the fact that I think that the more perspectives that you have, especially in leadership positions, the more rich your content and storytelling is. For women, it's funny because I think that the biggest thing that I think it differs. I mean, I think it comes down to the individual perspective in a lot of ways, but I do think that overall,
One thing that I see often, I'm contacted all the time by young white men who want jobs, who want to ask me to have a coffee to get advice, who have story pitches. They are they're very straightforward in asking for help. I don't get that much from women. I don't get that much from people of color. And I think that that's something that we should change. We should ask for help. We should we should put our hands up a little bit more often. So that's one piece of advice that I say, really talk to people. I think that the best way that my entire career is because of the mentors that I've had, and that I was lucky enough to meet along the way. And I learned that when you ask for help, they want to give help a lot of times. And so to learn to not be shy in your request is really important. So that's my advice.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Race to the microphone.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
I'm Kim Walsh-Childers. I'm a professor here. And it's great to hear you sounding so optimistic about all of this. So I'm hoping that you can make me feel more optimistic, too. One of the things that I worry about so much in the field of journalism is how much of our credibility we've lost. So
yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you think the format that Vox is using and kind of the approach that you're taking, can that help us win back our credibility? How do we go about persuading people that journalism and journalists are people they can trust?
Yeah, I think that, so I'm a little bit more optimistic with this because I have seen the fact that, especially in major breaking news situations, people are still turning to the media. They want help understanding stories. I say that because, one of the things that I always used to do at the Post was, and it was a little strange, but I would always do this in big breaking news situations like the Boston Marathon. If you go to Google Trends, it shows you what people are searching for. And invariably, people would be searching for big brand news organizations. They wanted to go to the New York Times. They wanted to go to the Boston Globe because they knew that we could give them the best information. And that, to me, shows the value of, creating a brand that is credible with the readers, even if we have lost some faith in the media industry overall, and we have in a major way. So while I still have some faith and optimism that readers do still seek us out, I think that the other thing that we need to do as an industry is to really think about our credibility and to think about how we can start to build trust with the readers. And the biggest thing for me is, there's two things. One is to be transparent, to be honest in your mistakes and to build on those mistakes. And then also to present our journalism not as a final product, but to really think of it as an ongoing, living, growing piece of information. This is something that we do that's very simple, but in breaking news situations, instead of just reporting the latest information, we have something that we do. It's what we know and what we don't know. It's just a simple, honest, deal that I'm making with the reader, that we don't know everything and that they need to understand that we don't know everything. But we're going to do our best to try to get the information to them as we figure it out ourselves. We need to approach the news much more. We need to admit that we don't have all the answers. And if we're engaged in a conversation with our readers and we're learning from them and building this information out, I think that will help. That's my hope. So twofold.
All right, good, thank you.
So is credibility the same as objectivity?
No, definitely not.
And are we seeing any transitions in that? I mean, you've got Jay Rosen in The View from Nowhere, and
yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I always sort of have cringed at our obsession with objectivity in journalism. I think that it's a strange way to present what we do. Eugene Meyer has 7 principles at the Washington Post. I think it's 7.
I think so.
Okay, good. And one of them is to discover the truth as best you can ascertain it. Is that how you pronounce that word? Ascertain it. Sorry, I'm such a reader. And that I think that's supposed to be our job, is that we're supposed to seek out facts, try to distill information as best as we can and present it to readers. It's not to be objective about the facts. It's to present the truth. I think that when you say you're completely objective, readers don't buy into that. They don't believe in that. They think if you say you have no biases, they will put biases on you. And I think that that's really where we have, by not showing sort of our record and by not showing that evolution that we have in our own work, I think that it makes readers question where we're coming from. They want to know. So yeah, I do think that there is a transition in that, definitely.
Hi, Melissa. Anna Gomez.
Hi.
You mentioned earlier continuing to learn every single day. What are some of the things that you do to ensure that you continue learning, whether it's at work or at home?
So some of the, like at the most like rudimentary way is that I try to use, I'm on the product side, so I am thinking about how we're creating our technology. So one of the things that I do is I try to use different devices. I try to only read the news on my phone for a day, or I try to only read the news on my laptop, or I try to use it on an Android phone. I see as part of my job, which is a fun part, to read the news. So I get to try to, I try as many different news apps and look at different news organizations. I'm sort of addicted to podcasts right now. I've gone down this I think a lot of people are, there's so many great podcasts out right now, but so I try to consume news as much as possible, because I think that like the best way to learn what we're doing is to see the work that other people are doing and to learn from their work. So that's sort of, I think about it in terms of like consumption patterns. And then we're reporters. And so I think a lot of what I do is to talk to people, and I get to talk to you guys and think about what you're doing and ask questions. I think about going to something like the Online News Association. I feel like I'm investigating our industry and asking questions about our industry. And that to me is, you get to always be learning as a journalist, and that's what I try to do. Welcome.
Hi, thank you again for coming. I'm Alec Carver, and I'm just building off what you had to say about objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
First, was that your plan as you were building Vox Media? And also, or is that just part of the format? We don't have to wire things over, because that's something I've noticed in the work of like people like Max Fisher. It's good facts, but their opinion is clear. And then, do you see that becoming more commonplace, or in the future? Kind of stalling here. Do you see the industry kind of abandoning objectivity as time goes by, as we're not shackled by the format, or? Yeah,
I mean, I think that it's. I think that it's again it's a result of the technology that you use, and so you have the ability online to steer people towards past information, and you're able to see sort of the body of work if you'd like to find it, and Max, for instance, he's one of our foreign editors, and he's just fantastic. Really, he's able to take large, complex subjects and distill them down. But he uses a lot of reference material, so he points people to reference information. So we want people to sort of we want them to see the path of our reporter's work. So they're able to, if they want to check his findings, they're able to see how he came to that decision, right, essentially. And that's something I think that we really want to see have happen. And I also think that it is a different brand online. We all grew up as bloggers, and part of the blogging attitude is that it's a conversation you're having. You're sort of constantly in discussion with other bloggers, with the commenters. It's kind of this ongoing exploration. Right. Blogging is so much more about. In some ways, I think it's this developing story. We think about this, you're a reporter and you're reporting on a story that lasts sort of the year. You know, how does that unfold over time? So that's really the way that we think about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Eric?
Hello. This segues kind of interestingly from Alex's question in that I would like to ask about kind of self-branded individuals that are able to create a audience prior to being with a news organization or between organizations or even while they're in an organization. I apologize. But basically, how do you weigh the experience of new journalistic talent of being a self-branded person via YouTube or blogging versus work experience or degree experience? And furthermore, how do you go about instilling those people into something like Vox Media without losing focus?
You know, that's an interesting question. I think it's really important. I want us to have reporters that do have audiences that build up again are seen as part of the discussion of news topics. We think about our reporters. We like to think about them as, you know, subject matter experts. They are someone that you can, over time, you learn to trust in their ability to report on the subjects that they're talking about. That you have faith in their ability to find the research and the people that they need to talk to about the subject matter. And I think when you do that, you build up. You do build up an audience. If you're really engaged in a discussion around something, over time, people are going to say, you know, this is somebody who has done a lot of work in this subject area, and I'm going to go to them for some information about this. So it is an important part of like what we like to find in our writers. I think about our television writer, our culture editor is Todd Vanderwolf, and he's someone who has for years written about the television industry, and he knows the people in the television industry. Really reported on them. He's been in discussions with them. His body of work is so extensive and rich, and you can see it in his stories. He's really able to dive into culture stories in a way, and I think make assessments about the industry because of his background. But that's not to say that we think every single person should be Todd Vanderwolf. You know, we want to see people grow into that as well at Vox. And so with our writers, you know, we really hope that we can help them find the subjects that they're excited about. You know, if they come to us from a different background, we've hired a few people who were not journalists beforehand. We hired a wonderful woman who's a human rights lawyer, for instance, before she came to us, and she had a blog on the side. She was writing about human rights. And we'd love to see her grow into a voice that's involved very much in the conversation of human rights. So it's something that, you know, we want people to come from all different areas, but we do want them to grow into subject matter experts in whatever subject they choose.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Melissa, this has been a fascinating conversation this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here in the studio, in the audience. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us at home. We'd like to thank, on behalf of the College of Journalism and Communications, the Knight Foundation for their great support for this series. If you'd like to learn more about Melissa's visit or our other Innovators visit, you can log on to www.jou.ufl.edu/innovators. Thank you and have a good evening.